The sun had barely risen over the small town, casting a pale light over the deserted streets. An old man stood in front of the grave, unmarked and weathered, with a blood-stained military badge clutched in his trembling hands. His eyes, once bright and full of life, now seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken words, a depth of pain that echoed through the silence. The cold morning air carried the whispers of the past, and the old man's distant gaze seemed to see beyond the present into the ghosts that haunted him. Years earlier, the same man, then a young soldier, had laughed with his brother in arms, sharing rations and dreams under the scorching desert sun. The promise of returning home together was an unbreakable pact, sealed with a firm handshake. Their bond was strong, forged in the fire of adversity, and their hearts were full of hope and camaraderie. The young soldier's eyes sparkled with a sense of invincibility, and his smile could light up the darkest of nights. He was a man with a purpose, a man with a future, and the world seemed to stretch out before him like an endless canvas waiting to be painted. The deafening sound of the explosion still echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the day that changed everything. The dust and his brother's scream were etched in his memory, a haunting melody that played on repeat. The impossible choice he had made in that moment, to hold the position and protect civilians, or to run to rescue the only bond he had left, was a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The weight of that choice was crushing, a burden that he carried with him every step of the way. The collision of opposing forces, duty versus feeling, loyalty versus survival, had left him scarred, a man torn apart by the consequences of his actions. Back home, the silence of his own house was more deafening than any explosion. The badge, now a weight in his hand, was the only link to a past he tried, in vain, to bury. Nights were populated by shadows and whispers, and the outside world seemed distant, unreal. The old man's eyes would often wander to the photograph of a young girl, a daughter he had never known, a reminder of the life he had left behind. The guilt and the pain were overwhelming, a constant reminder of his failure as a father, as a soldier, and as a man. The silence was a heavy blanket that suffocated him, a constant reminder of all that he had lost. He returns to the grave, no longer with raw pain, but with a silent acceptance. He leaves the badge on the unmarked tombstone, a final farewell, and turns his back. This time there are no tears, only the wind carrying away the last echoes of a war he was finally ready to leave behind. As he walks away, the old man's shoulders seem to straighten, his step a little lighter, his heart a little freer. The weight of the badge is gone, replaced by the weight of his daughter's hand in his, a hand that he had never held before, but one that he would never let go of again. The old man's eyes, once haunted by the ghosts of his past, now seemed to hold a glimmer of hope, a sense of redemption, and a chance to start anew. The old creaky door swung open, a reluctant greeting to a man who had been away for far too long. The house, once a beacon of warmth and love, now stood as a testament to time and neglect, its walls bearing witness to the silence that had filled the years. He stepped inside, his boots echoing off the empty rooms, each step a reminder of the life he had missed. The air was thick with the scent of old books and stale air, a heavy blanket that wrapped around his heart, weighing him down. As he moved through the house, his eyes wandered, taking in the familiar yet foreign landscape. Every step, every glance was a journey through time, a reminder of what could have been, of what should have been. He paused in front of a door, his hand reaching out to touch the handle, hesitating for a moment before pushing it open. The room was small, filled with the simple, innocent belongings of a child. A bed, a dresser, a clothing. All stood as sentinels, guarding the memories of a life he had never known. A photograph on the dresser caught his eye, a picture of a young girl with a bright smile and sparkling eyes. She was a stranger, yet somehow she was a part of him, a piece of his own heart and soul. He felt a pang in his chest, a mix of emotions that he couldn't quite untangle. Guilt, regret, love, and longing all swirled together, a vortex that pulled him under, threatening to consume him. He reached out a trembling hand, his fingers brushing against the edge of the frame, as if touching the photograph could somehow bridge the gap between them. The silence in the room was oppressive, a physical presence that pressed against his skin, making it hard to breathe. He felt like an intruder, a stranger in his own life, a man who had abandoned his family and his future. The weight of his decisions, the burden of his past, threatened to crush him, to consume him whole. Yet as he looked at the photograph, he felt a spark of hope, a glimmer of light in the darkness. It was a reminder that there was still a way forward, a chance to redeem himself, to make amends for the mistakes of the past. He stood there for a long time, lost in thought, the only sound the creaking of the old house, the only movement the dust motes dancing in the faint light. The world outside receded, and all that was left was the man, the photograph, and the silence. It was a moment of reckoning, a moment of truth, a moment when the past and the present collided, and the future hung in the balance. The photograph seemed to glow with an otherworldly light, a beacon calling to him, guiding him towards a path he had never taken, a path that led to redemption, to forgiveness, and to love. As the silence stretched out, he felt the weight of his responsibilities, the burden of his obligations. He was a father, a man who had never known his child, a man who had never been there to guide her, to protect her, to love her. The thought was a knife to the heart, a painful reminder of all that he had missed. Yet even in the midst of that pain, he felt a sense of determination, a sense of purpose. He would make it right. He would find a way to connect with his daughter, to be the father she deserved, to be the man he should have been. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, a path filled with obstacles and challenges. But he was ready to face his demons, ready to confront his past, ready to forge a new future. The photograph seemed to smile at him, a gentle encouragement, a reminder that he was not alone. He took a deep breath, the air filling his lungs, and began to walk towards the door, towards the unknown, towards a future that was uncertain but full of hope. The house, once a prison, now stood as a threshold, a doorway to a new life, a new beginning. He stepped out into the bright sunlight, the warmth on his skin a welcome respite from the cold darkness of his past. The world was a different place, a place of possibility, of promise, of redemption. He felt a sense of peace, a sense of calm, wash over him, a sense of belonging to something greater than himself. The photograph, now tucked away in his pocket, seemed to beat like a heart, a reminder of the love that awaited him, the love that would guide him through the darkest of times. As he walked away from the house, he felt the silence of the past begin to fade, replaced by the sounds of the present. Birds sang in the trees, children laughed in the distance, and the wind rustled through the leaves. It was a symphony of sound, a celebration of life, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope. He smiled, a small, tentative smile, and continued on his way, the photograph in his pocket, the future ahead of him, and the silence of the past slowly receding into the distance. The road ahead was long, winding its way through the hills and valleys of his heart. But he was ready to face whatever lay ahead, ready to forge a new path, a path that would lead him to his daughter, to redemption, and to peace. The sun beat down on his face, warming his skin, illuminating the way forward. He walked, one step at a time, the silence of the past slowly giving way to the sounds of the present, the darkness of his heart slowly giving way to the light of his soul. And as he walked, the world around him began to come alive. The trees swayed in the breeze, their leaves rustling softly. The birds sang their sweet melodies, filling the air with music. The sun shone down upon his face, warming his skin, illuminating the path ahead. It was a new beginning, a fresh start, a chance to redeem himself, to make amends for the mistakes of the past. The photograph in his pocket seemed to pulse with life, a reminder of the love that awaited him, the love that would guide him through the darkest of times. The silence of the past slowly receded, replaced by the sounds of the present. He felt a sense of peace, a sense of calm, wash over him, a sense of belonging to something greater than himself. The world was a different place, a place of possibility, of promise, of redemption. He smiled, a small, tentative smile, and continued on his way, the photograph in his pocket, the future ahead of him, and the silence of the past slowly fading into the distance. In the end, it was not the words that mattered, but the silence. The silence that spoke of love, of loss, of longing. The silence that echoed through the empty rooms. The silence that filled the spaces between the words. It was a silence that was both painful and beautiful. A reminder of all that had been and all that could be. And as he stood there, the photograph in his pocket, the future ahead of him, he knew that he would carry that silence with him, a reminder of the journey he had taken, the journey that had led him to this moment, this place, this sense of peace.